Good evening, and welcome to another spooky episode of Codo Cinema, the podcast show where I talk about movies. I bid you welcome as your host, Mark Codo, aka Codoman. Well, folks, we continue with Codo Cinema Horror Month with another movie. Now, this movie I'm going to talk about is The Exorcist. Now, The Exorcist is a 1973 American supernatural horror film directed by William Friedkin from a screenplay by William Peter Blatty and is based on his 1971 novel of the same name. The film stars Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Kitty Wynn, Jack McGowran, Jason Miller, and Linda Blair. The film is also produced by Peter Blatty and is distributed by Warner Brothers with production company Hoya Productions. Now, as I mentioned, The Exorcist is based on William Peter Blatty's 1971 novel of the same name, and this novel, which Blatty wrote, it details the demonic possession of 11-year-old Reagan McNeil, the daughter of a famous actress, and the two priests who attempt to exorcise the demon. The novel itself was basis of a highly successful film adaptation, which is the 1973 film of the same name, was released 2 years later after the book came out, to which William Peter Blatty did the screenplay on. Now, the inspiration for that novel was inspired by a 1949 case of supposed demonic possession and exorcism that Blatty heard about while he was a student in the class of 1950 at Georgetown University. And as a result, the novel takes place in Washington, D.C., near the campus of Georgetown University. Now, that sounds very interesting. Now, that's something you don't hear a lot these days. You know, like hearing or seeing an actual exorcism. But of course, with William Peter Blatty, he was inspired by the 1949 case of this supposed event, and he was at Georgetown University prior to when he experienced it, prior to hearing this and experiencing this, and of course writing the book as well. So that's pretty much something right there, especially from William Peter Blatty. And like I said, it's not something that you don't hear a whole lot that's something you don't really hear a lot. But unfortunately, according to William Peter Blatty, it did. Now, as for the film, Blatty, as I mentioned, who also produced the movie, Friedkin was the director, and Blatty chose Friedkin as his choice to direct. And William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, was coming off the Academy Award winning film, The French Connection, and prior to that, the film went through a tough production. Like, this film had a cursed production. Like, the production company, Warner Brothers, had difficulty casting the film. And of course, the choice of casting unknown actors like Burstyn, Blair, and Miller instead of major stars drew opposition from Warner Brothers executives. And by the time it got to principal photography, it was very difficult. And of course, it took place in both hot deserts and refrigerated sets. Many cast and crew members were injured, some died, and unusual accidents delayed shooting. And the production itself took twice as long as scheduled and cost almost 3 times the initial budget. The many mishaps have led to a belief that the film was cursed. And that says a lot, because part of this film's plot, and of course this is also referring back to the book too, like, the film's plot follows the demonic possession of a young girl and her mother's attempt to rescue her through an exorcism by 2 Catholic priests. And coming to think about it, this film would have been easy to make, right? Nope. The film turned out to be way difficult to make, especially of how it's being set up. But of course, going back to what I said, the production took twice as long as scheduled and cost almost 3 times the initial budget. Of course, as I mentioned, Warner Brothers executives drew opposition about casting unknown actors. Plus, the film taking place in both hot deserts and refrigerated sets. Cast and crew members were injured. Were injured. Some died, and unusual accidents delayed shooting. If you know what I'm saying, right? Even the film's budget cost almost 3 times the initial budget. So let's do the math right there. Okay, the film's budget. Here's the film's budget. The film's budget was $12 million. $12 million. So I guess the original budget was $4 million. But unfortunately, due to the difficult production, the budget went up 3 times. So it went up from $4 million to $8 million to $12 million. That's 3 times the budget. It started off with 4 million, then it went up to 8 million, and now 12 million. That's 3 times the budget. So take $4 million, times that by 3. Boom. You got $12 million right there. From what the original budget was going to be. Times that by 3. Wow, that is crazy. But this is a film that came out in 1973, mind you. It's not a big budget. Well, it's still big, but not as big as some of the movies we're getting. But anyway, with that being said, despite the difficult production, The Exorcist was released in 25 theaters in the United States on December 26th of 1973. Reviews at the time were mixed, but audiences waited in long lines. During cold weather, the sold-out shows were even more profitable for Warner Brothers, who had booked it into those theaters under four-wall distribution rental agreements. The first time a major studio had done that. Some viewers suffered adverse physical reactions, fainting or vomiting to shocking scenes such as a realistic cerebral angiography. Many children were even allowed to see it, leading to charges that the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, had accommodated the studio by giving the film an R rating instead of an X rating to ensure the troubled production is commercial success. And several cities attempted to ban this film or even prevent children from attending this. And at the end of its original theatrical run, the film grossed $193 million. So it made money at the box office. So it made its money back, and it was a box office hit. And however, as life went on for this movie, it had several re-releases, and it grossed $441.3 million. So basically, as of this year, the film has a overall box office of $441.3 million, and that's including re-releases. At the time when it was released in 1973, it had a box office run of $193 million. But as of today, it has made $441.3 million. That's insane, especially for a difficult film to be made. It was even more crazy, and I mentioned that already, children were allowed to see this film. Like, children were allowed to see this film, and this movie was rated R. This is an R-rated movie. I'm not messing around. And children went to see this movie back in 1973. That is so messed up. Like, dude, these kids must have serious guts going to see this movie back in 1973. This is a different time period, mind ya. Really? Kids actually went to see The Exorcist in 1973? Man, that takes serious guts, man. But boy, I gotta be honest with you, that is just messed up. This is not a kids movie. Like, this is like an adult. This is basically an adult movie. I mean, sure, yes, it has a young child in the movie, but that doesn't mean. But when you really think about it, especially the type of plot it has, that doesn't automatically make it a kids movie, mind you. That is severely messed up right there. Oof. Even the results from the results from the people who went to see this movie, like, Jiminy Crickets. I'm going back to what I read. Some viewers who saw this movie suffered adverse physical reactions, fainting or vomiting to shocking scenes, such as the realistic cerebral angiography. And there's even more scenes that are even messed up too, and I will get to that when I break down this movie. But before I do that, the cultural conversation around the film helped it become the first horror film to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, as well as 9 others. Blatty, the author of the book and the producer of this movie, including the writer, won Best Adapted Screenplay, while the sound engineers took home Best Sound. And with the film's success, it has had several sequels, and at the time was the highest-grossing R-rated horror film, unadjusted for inflation, until the 2017 movie It. The Exorcist even significantly influenced pop culture, and several publications regard it as one of the greatest horror films ever made. And in 2010, the Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And that is actually true because The Exorcist is not only one of the scariest movies of all time, but is actually one of the greatest movies of all time. Even though critical reception is mixed back then, today it is often regarded as one of the greatest movies of all time, plus one of the scariest horror movies out there too. But anyway, let's get to the breakdown of this movie. So let me break down 1973's The Exorcist. So the movie opens up in Iraq, where we see Father Lancaster Marin, who is being played by Max von Sydow, who is an elderly Catholic priest on an archaeological digging site in Iraq. And Marin has a sense of foreboding and encounters a number of strange omens. Finally, Marin discovers a statue of a bizarre demonic being known as Pazuzu. And back in the United States, in Washington, D.C.'s upscale Georgetown neighborhood, a successful actress named Chris McNeil, being played by Ellen Burstyn, begins experiencing strange phenomena. Chris lives with her 12-year-old daughter Reagan, who is being played by Linda Blair, her personal assistant Sharon, being played by Kitty Wynn, and two housekeepers. Reagan's father is estranged for reasons unknown. There are mysterious, unexplained sounds in the attic of the house which Chris attributes to rats, and Reagan slowly begins to exhibit strange behavior, undergoing behavioral changes, much like depression and anxiety. She turns up at Chris's bedroom one night, complaining that her own bed was shaking. So this is getting to the point where, okay, this is where Reagan, who is being played by Linda Blair. Fun fact: Linda Blair was very young in this movie. Like, she was like, this is one of her first acting roles, and Linda was like 13 years old when this movie was being made. Like 13 years old, and she's a child actress in this movie. And fun fact, like, Linda Blair was actually nominated for an Academy Award in this movie. So that's really saying something right there. And her character Reagan, like her character Reagan is experiencing, different behavioral changes like depression and anxiety. So there's something right there. So it's hinting at it's hinting that something's going to happen to Reagan throughout the movie. And of course, with the bed shaking, that's like kind of like a warning of what's going on, especially with Reagan. Now, Chris is working on a movie in Georgetown with a director named Burke Dennings, being played by Jack McGowran. And while filming a scene one day, she notices a young Catholic priest watching her. His name is Damien Karras, being played by Jason Miller. And Father Damien Karras, which is Jason Miller's character, has a background in psychology and counsels parishioners at a nearby church. Chris also notices him while walking home from the shoot one day. And as for Karras, as I mentioned, he has a background in psychology, but he's a thoughtful, conflicted man, and discusses his vocation with a superior and asks to be transferred because he feels he's losing his faith. Now, of course, this is referring to his religious faith, the Catholic faith. Now he's basically a Catholic in this. He's basically a Catholic priest as well, even though he's basically a Catholic priest. So that's basically his Catholic faith. Like, he's basically having a crisis, like a religious crisis going on inside of him. But of course, this leads into losing his elderly mother, who lives alone in a slum in New York, visits her and is reminded of how lonely her life is, and he feels guilty that she has to live in such poor surroundings. Now, to continue on, the strange occurrences in the McNeil house begins to increase. Reagan reveals that she has been playing with an Ouija board and claims that she has the ability to communicate with a spiritual entity all by herself. Now, going off topic, when I saw this movie, I forgot to mention, I forgot to mention that I actually saw this movie. I really did. I seen this movie, and what did I think about this movie? I thought this movie was real good. I thought this movie was very good. It's so messed up too, knowing the fact of what I'm seeing from this, of what I was watching from this movie. But one thing I noticed in this movie is that when Reagan takes out an Ouija board, I knew right away something bad was going to happen, because when you really think about, and because this is a Ouija board, that's not a good sign. And the fact that this Ouija board has like connections to like the to the spiritual world, especially the demon realm, especially to the demon realm as well, because this is like an Ouija board, right? This Ouija board has a connection to the occult, right? This is not your typical board game. This is a demonic occult board right there that connects with spirits, right? And that's what Reagan was using in that movie, especially in the beginning of the movie. Like, you see that in the beginning of the movie when Reagan pull out that Ouija board, just communicate with spiritual entities all by herself. Like, that's a big red flag right up there. Like, I knew something was gonna happen once she pulled out that Ouija board. So anyway, moving forward, a nearby Catholic church is desecrated. A statue of the Virgin Mary painted crudely with very uncomfortable design choices, if you know what I'm saying. Like I don't want to go too far into detail. Of that, but for those who have seen this movie, probably know what I'm talking about, right? Even Reagan also works with clay and paint, making small animal sculptures. Meanwhile, Father Karras' mother falls ill, and due to a lack of funds, she's placed in a very shabby hospital and resigned to a ward full of mental patients. Father Karras is distraught when he visits her, and she seems to blame him for her situation. And later she passes away under these conditions, adding to his sorrow. Later that night, Chris has an elaborate party at her home with a number of guests, and one of her guests is another, and one of her guests is another Jesuit named Father Dyer. And one of her guests is also another I want to say Catholic priest of some sort, and this priest, his name is Father Dyer, who's being played by Father William O'Malley, and Chris asks him about Karras, having noticed him and referring to him as intense. She finds that Karras and Dyer are good friends, and during the party, Reagan appears happy and social, but she reappears after being sent to bed, dressed in her nightgown, and urinates on the carpet in front of the guests while making an ominous statement to prominent astronaut. And she says this quote, "You're gonna die up there." That's what she says. That's what Reagan says in this movie. And this is basically something's up with Reagan, if you know what I'm saying. And after the guests leave, Chris bathes Reagan and puts her to bed, but is startled by a loud sound from Reagan's bedroom. She rushes back down the hall and discovers Reagan's bed shaking violently, raising up off the floor with Reagan on it. And of course, Chris subjects Reagan to a series of medical tests to discover what the problem is. The doctors are unable to discover anything, despite putting Reagan through some grueling, painful procedures. And this is basically leading up to to a scene, right? This is a scene where they're testing Reagan. This scene, right? Now, this scene was actually a very difficult scene to get through. It's a very difficult scene, to be honest. This is a real difficult scene. Probably one of the most uncomfortable scenes in this movie, right? It's so uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. It's the angiography scene, right? The angiography scene is obviously, in my opinion, the most hard to watch scene. And this is a scene in which a needle spurts blood from Reagan's neck. And it caused audiences the most discomfort. And according to Blatty, who himself never watched it, Fredkin too has found its depiction of medical science impinging upon the innocence of this little girl, and disturbs audiences the most, more than any of the film's possession scenes. Even that scene has been criticized as unappetizing, the film's most needless scene, and revolting. Like, the angiography scene is obviously the most uncomfortable scene in this movie. And to those who don't know what angiography is, it's basically a medical imaging technique used to visualize the inside of blood vessels and organs of the body, with particular interest in the arteries, veins, and the heart chambers. That's what angiography means. Just to let you all know, it's basically, showing like an angiogram of the brain, showing a transverse projection of the cerebral, which is basically like inside your brain, or your head, I should say. And that scene that was being presented in this movie, the most uncomfortable scene to watch. That is insane. And there's even more scenes. There are also more scenes that are uncomfortable as well, and I will get to that pretty soon. So yeah, after that painful moment, we go back to Chris's house, where Reagan suffers what appears to be a seizure attack, and the two doctors visit to assist, and they find her rising and falling up and down the bed in a way that seems impossible for a human being. And when they try to sedate her, she hurls them across the room with abnormal strength, speaking to them in what seems to be a male voice. And this is basically Reagan being possessed by this entity. This is basically a demon that she's being possessed. Like she starts talking in a male voice, saying, "Keep away, the soul is mine." Eventually, they sedate her. This is at the moment that she's basically being possessed by this demon from hell. Like, she is speaking with a male voice. This is the demon that is talking. Like, this is the demon that is talking. The demon that is possessing the body of Reagan. Oh boy, shit just got real right there. So, but as I mentioned, the doctors were able to sedate her, and there are no options left. The doctors advise Chris to search for a psychiatrist, and the situation then worsens when Chris is out one evening, and she returns to find the house is deserted, except for Reagan, who is all alone in her bedroom and appears to be in a deep sleep. And the bedroom is freezing cold, right? Even the window standing wide open, and she is uncovered. Sharon returns home, and Chris is furious with her for leaving Reagan unattended. But Sharon explains that she left Reagan in the care of Burke, who is visiting the house while she went to the pharmacy to get Reagan's medication, and Burke's absence is unexplained until the doorbell rings and an associate of Chris breaks the news that Burke has just died on the steps outside of Chris's house. Like, Jiminy Crickets, what the hell is going on? Like, what is going on? Like shit is happening left and right in this movie, right? So the following day, Karras is approached by a detective named Lieutenant Kinderman, being played by Lee J. Cobb, who questions him about the fact that the desecration of the church could be connected to Burke's death. He tells Karras that Burke's body was found with his head turned completely around, and the police department considers it a homicide. And after a failed session with a psychiatrist, the doctors reluctantly discuss another possibility with Chris. They mention the phenomenon of a demonic possession and the rites of exorcism. And while they seem to hold professional contempt for it, they do admit that it has been known to solve problems, such as what Reagan is going through. Chris is skeptical at first, but having no religious affiliation of her own. Like, Chris is skeptical because Chris does not have any real religious affiliation of her own. But shortly thereafter, Chris is visited by Kinderman, and he questions Chris about the events of the evening of Burke's death. And Chris is nervous, hesitant to tell him about Reagan's problem. While he is visiting, he notices a few small animal designs that Reagan has crafted, and they are similar in the style to the desecration of the statue in the church. Kinderman leaves, and immediately a violent disturbance comes from Reagan's bedroom. Like, like, like Chris, Ellen Bernstein's character, hears a deep male voice bellowing at Reagan to do it. Like, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And Reagan is screaming in protest. Like Chris finds Reagan like jerking off. Like, Reagan is jerking off with a crucifix so violently. Like she's jerking off with a crucifix so violently. Like, this is another uncomfortable scene right there, right? Like, this is another uncomfortable scene with Reagan jerking off so violently with a crucifix. And Chris tries to stop Reagan, but Reagan assaults Chris, her own mom. Like, Chris is the mother in this movie, right? Like, Chris is the mother in this movie, and Reagan assaults her with impossible strength, and furniture around the room starts to move on its own. And by the way, going off topic, Ellen Bernstein suffered an injury on this movie. Like, she actually got injured in this movie. Like, this is when Reagan was jerking off, and Bernstein suffers a broken tailbone in this scene. And this is a crazy scene. This is a crazy scene because not only is Reagan jerking off, Ellen Bernstein suffers a broken tailbone in this scene. Like that, like, she actually got injured in this scene. That is brutal. Very, very brutal. Oh my goodness. That hurts so bad for Ellen Bernstein. That really, really hurts. Oof. And then there's another scene that was not featured in this movie. It's basically the spider walk scene, and the spider walk was actually performed by stuntwoman Ann Miles, and this was the reason why this was not included in the final cut, because the director William Friedkin cut it out of the film over Blatty's objection just prior to the premiere, believing it came too early in the movie. Whether the scene had been shot at all was debated by fans for years afterwards, although the director denied having done so until Kermode found the footage in Warner Brothers archives in the mid-1990s while researching his book on the film, and it was restored in the 2000 director's cut, albeit with a muddy, grainy look that one critic said made the scene seem I want to say surprising, using an added shot showing Reagan with blood flow from her mouth. And also, Miles was not credited for that scene. Like, oof, that was oof. I don't even want to know about that scene. But yes, that spiral walk scene was supposed to be a part of this movie, but it was cut out of the movie due to the fact that, it was probably shot too early. But of course, that was a scene in that movie that was actually cut out of the final cut. But anyways, get back to the movie. As Chris watches in horror, her daughter's head completely turns around backwards, and she speaks to Chris in Burke's voice. Chris then realizes that Reagan is responsible for Burke's death. Yes, that is what's happening. Reagan is responsible for Burke's death, but also this is the demon doing this, right? This is the demon possessing Reagan's body. And the demon was the one who did that to Burke. This is the demon who killed Burke. But even though, yes, this is in Reagan's body, so Reagan was the one who did the killing. So this is like a double entendre. Both Reagan and the demon killed Burke. So desperate, Chris arranges to meet with Father Karras, and when she mentions the notion of exorcism, Karras is almost amused. He tells her that exorcism is nearly unheard of, and that he doesn't know anybody who has ever performed one. Chris is distraught and convinces him to meet with Reagan anyway. Karras is shocked by the girl's appearance. She is tied to the headboard of her bed, her face misshapen and covered in lesions, her voice deep and gravelly. And, dude, I'm going to be honest with you, the makeup artist did a fantastic job with Reagan, especially with actress Linda Blair. Like, putting the makeup on Linda Blair must have taken a lot of time. As you can tell, there's like cuts on her face. There's like cuts on her face, and the skin is starting to rot. It's rotting in a grayish color, so to speak. And you notice, right, and you'll see right away, this is the demon rotting her body. Like, the body is getting so rotten, especially from the face, as if like a fight has broken out. But no, this is the demon possessing Reagan's body. You could tell that the body is being rotten right now. Like, the demon's rotting the body, and the makeup artist did a fantastic job with the makeup for Reagan being possessed. And during the conversation between Reagan and Karras, Reagan announces that she's the devil, and toys with Karras in a number of ways, seeming to make a drawer next to the bed open all by itself, then speaking to Karras in a number of languages. She also conjures up the voice of a subway vagrant that Karras has encountered alone earlier. Karras remains unconvinced, and when Reagan claims, your mother's in here with us," Karras asks her what's his mother's maiden name, and unable to answer, Reagan vomits spectacularly all over him. Ugh, a disgusting moment right there too. Like, the actual vomit, like, dude, that vomit though, ugh. That is disgusting. Like the vomit is so green. Like, it's green vomit that she is spitting out in front of Father Karras, right? Like, it's literal green vomit. I believe what they use for the vomit is, it's pea soup that they used for this movie, and I believe I heard that that the vomit was supposed to splash onto Father Karras' clothes and not his face, right? I believe that was the case right there. Like, it was supposed to spit onto the clothes and not the face, right? That is just disgusting. And it's not the only time, and that's not the last, and it's not the last time we see the pea soup vomit come out of Reagan's mouth. Like, damn, what the hell? Like, that is just disgusting. Ugh, can't imagine. I don't even know. I don't even know what the documentary of that would look like. Like, I can't imagine the documentary behind this movie, right? Like, I can't imagine the documentary behind this movie. I'm pretty sure there's a documentary of this movie somewhere, but that's going off topic. But anyway, Chris cleans Karras' sweater and discusses Reagan with him. Karras is still not convinced that Reagan is possessed, especially because Reagan says that she's the devil, and he recommends psychiatric care for her. Chris pleads with him to help her obtain an exorcism, swearing that the thing in the bedroom upstairs is not her daughter. And I believe, obviously, the demonic voice that Reagan is talking in is basically Pazuzu. Like, this is not Reagan. This is Pazuzu talking inside Reagan's body. Like Jiminy Crickets. That is crazy. That is crazy. That's insane. And kids actually went to see this movie when it came in theaters in 1973? I mean, like, what the hell? That's insane! So later on, Karras visits Reagan again and records their conversation, during which he sprinkles Reagan with water. He tells her it is holy water, and she begins to scream in pain, seemingly going into a trance and speaking in a strange language. Later, he tells Chris that it will be difficult to make a case with the bishop for possession. The water he sprinkled on Reagan was simply tap water and was not blessed. The bishop and Karras himself would consider Reagan to be mentally ill and not possessed. Chris confides in Karras and tells him that Reagan was the one who killed Burke Dennings. Later, Karras uses his tape recordings of Reagan's seemingly incomprehensible babble to discover that she is really speaking backwards, in English. A phone call from Sharon interrupts him. She summons him to the house to see Reagan, not wanting Chris to see that's happening. As they look at Reagan's unconscious body, the words, "Help me," begin to materialize on her stomach, rising up in her skin like scar tissue. So that sounds like that's basically the message that says, "Help me." That's not the demon. That's Reagan. That is Reagan begging and that's Reagan calling out for help. Like Reagan wants like Reagan needs help. Like she needs to get this demon out of her. Like get rid of this demon. That's what's going on, and that's what the words "help me" is saying in this scene. So Karras reluctantly agrees to try and get an exorcism for Reagan, although he seems to have more in common with the doctors who recommended it as a form of shock therapy. The church calls in Father Marin, Max von Sydow. The church calls in Father Marin, who is being played by Max von Sydow, to perform the exorcism, with Karras assisting. Marin has performed exorcisms in the past, including a difficult one that nearly killed him, according to the bishop. When Marin arrives at the McNeil house, Reagan bellows his name from upstairs as if she knows him, and she makes strange animal sounds. He warns Karras about conversing with the demon and reminds him that the demon will mix lies with the truth to confuse and attack them. Now, I'm going to go off topic again because there is another moment in this scene that is actually iconic. There's a moment in this scene that is very iconic, and it's the scene that features Father Marin. Now, Father Marin is being played by Max von Sydow, as I mentioned, and while filming this scene, Father Marin's arrival scene was filmed on Max von Sydow's first day on set. The scene where he steps out of a cab and stands in front of the McNeil residence, silhouetted in a misty street lamps glow and staring up at a beam of light from a bedroom window, is one of the most famous scenes in this movie. And that scene alone was used for film posters and home media release covers. It was inspired by a 1954 painting called Empire of Light, and William Friedkin wanted to evoke visually the language Blatty used in the novel for this scene, likening Marin to a, traveler frozen in time, standing next to a streetlight in the fog when he gets out of the cab. And the director gave the crew a full day to light the scene, using mainly arc lights and tripod-mounted troopers, and boasting the brightness existing street lamps. Cinematographer Owen Rosman said this was the most difficult of all the film's nighttime exterior shots. In order to get the beam of light the way Friedkin wanted it, the crew had to take the window frame out of the facade they had attached to the house for filming, put it behind the window, and then put the spotlight in between the window and frame. As they were shooting, Rosman said the wind picked up, making it hard to hold the fog effect. By working quickly, he and the camera crew were able to get the shot, with the director finding the first take satisfactory. And I am glad that shot was there, because seeing Father Merrin out in the shadows like this, with the fog and the light and the cab and the house in front of him, that is that is chef's kiss. A great shot from this movie. And that shot was so good, as I mentioned, it was put on movie posters, and that is amazing. It says a lot when one of the most iconic shots that is used in the movie is used on a film poster. That really says a lot, right there. Moving forward, when Marin enters Reagan's bedroom alongside with Father Karras, Reagan immediately begins with a string of obscenities, and this is where Marin and Karras are reciting the ritual of exorcism, and Reagan manifests strange phenomena such as levitation, telekinesis, an abnormally long tongue, and strange vomiting. She vomits on the bed, by the way, just to let you all know. This is obviously one of the most iconic scenes in this movie. This is basically both Karras and Marin reciting this Roman ritual, and they're basically performing this exorcism to get the demon out of Reagan's body. And it's an amazing scene too, but it's also a difficult scene to film. Just to let you all know, because if you notice right away, like the room is very dark, and the only light that there's literally very little light to this scene too, which adds to the atmosphere, right? Like, there is light, but it's very little light that adds to the atmosphere. And what's also crazy too is you see the breath, like you see the breath come, you see the character's breath, right? It's all coming out of their mouths because the room is very, very cold. And the director and William Friedkin actually brought in a huge refrigerator, to freeze the room. Like, he brought that refrigerator in to freeze this very room. There are no other there's no spotlights or stage lights in this scene. Like, yeah, there's one light in this very scene with Marin and Karras. But the thing is, like, Friedkin wanted the bedroom to be very cold, and of course, there's this refrigerator system that was actually installed to cool the set to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And since the set lighting warmed the air, it remained cold enough to film for only 3 minutes at a time. Due to frequent breakdowns, only 5 shots could be finished each day to complete the scene, and filmed in script order took a month to complete. That is crazy right there. Like, I can't imagine having a room this cold to have a certain number of shots be filmed. Like, that is insane. But at the same time, as difficult as it was to film that scene, it paid off very well, because it is a famous scene. It's a famous sequence in this movie, because there's a lot of moments in this sequence that are pretty famous. Like Marin is trying so hard. He's reciting this Roman ritual. Like, he's telling this demon to be silent, demon. Like, Max von Sydow puts up a very good performance, and he actually got nominated for an Oscar for this movie, by the way. And on top of that, we even get another headspin moments from Reagan, and it's another iconic moment too in this movie. Reagan, being possessed by this demon, keeps on talking, like shouting obscenities, like telling Marin just to, like, oh, shut the hell up. Like, that's what's going on in this very scene, right? And it's a crazy scene too, and they're both, and boy, these guys have serious balls, right? Like, boy, these guys have serious balls. Like, both the priest and the demon, they don't stop talking. Those two guys don't stop talking. Like, they just keep on going. They keep on going and going and going, until the moment where Reagan begins to turn her head around as Marin continues to talk. and recite the Roman ritual. And that scene alone, as uncomfortable as that scene is, that it is an iconic moment. And Karras is just watching it all. Like he's like, oh man, that is crazy. If you know what I'm saying. And then this leads into another famous moment where Regan is being levitated up from her bed, and Marin and Karras is watching it all, and Maris sees Regan being levitated up in the air. They both realize that it's happening. This is it. It's the power of Christ. Like Regan is floating up in the air, like her eyes are dead white, and it's just basically as if the power of Christ is doing something. Like you hear both Marin and Karras shouting this line: "The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you." That is a very, very famous moment from this scene. Like both Karras and Marin shouting "the power of Christ compels you" to Regan is obviously one of the most famous moments from this scene. And even that scene alone has been referenced a few times. This is the end actually parodied this scene when Jonah Hill was actually possessed by this demon, and Jay Baruchel tried to recreate the scene from The Exorcist by doing the power of Christ compels you moments. But of course, Jonah Hill being possessed by that demon in that movie was like, "Oh, does it, Jay? Oh, does it, Jay? Does it really compel me?" Now that scene was from the This Is the End movie that came out in 2013. Just to let you all know. Moving forward, Regan begins to talk to Karras in the voice of his mother, and Karras starts to break down and leaves the room. Although Marin sends him out of the room, and Marin tries to continue the exorcism on all of his own. So later on, when Karras comes back in, he finds Marin dead on the floor, and was basically I'm pretty sure it's a heart attack of some sort. And Karras sees Marin dead, and he is upset and angry. And we see Regan in the corner, who is cackling gleefully, this demon inside Regan's body, laughing as it was funny. No, it's not even funny. Marin is dead, and this demon is being an evil son of a bitch. I'm referring to the demon, by the way, not Regan. This demon just being so evil, being so damn evil, is laughing at Marin dead from a heart attack. And Karras jumps up in front, and Karras jumps up in front of Regan, being possessed by this demon, grabs her, and literally fights this demon, and shouts at the demon, come into Karras' body. Don't take Regan. Like he's referring to himself, like, have the demon take Karras. That's what Karras is like. No, I'm done with this. I'm done with this thing. Come on. Like the demon, like the transference works almost immediately. Karras begins to transform into the demon. The demon. He's about to transform into the demon. You see the rotten skin body on his face and the scars too. His eyes begin to look dead, and of course, as a result of that, Regan returns to her normal self. He releases himself of the curse by committing suicide, hurling himself out of Regan's window and tumbling down the stairs outside of Regan's window, and lays dead in the street below, and is basically laying on the ground, dying in the street below. And at that very moment, Regan is free. Regan is free from this. Is free. Like the demon is no longer possessing Regan. It's gone. the demon is gone. The demon is gone. And at that moment, Reagan begins to cry. Like, she cries out to her mom. Her mom comes into the room to comfort her. And it's a very upsetting scene because as of now, Reagan is upset. And the fact, because of what she experienced, of how much torture she went through. That is so upsetting right there. Well, it's a sign of relief. It's a sign of relief for Reagan, but at the same time, very uncomfortable and torturing at the same time. And everybody is seeing all of it. Everybody is coming across the street to see Father Karras out in the street, and Father Dyer happens to walk upon the scene, and the ministers, and of course, like, he sees Father Karras, and he was able to administer the last rites to his friend, setting Karras free eternally. And in a brief epilogue, we see Chris and Reagan as they prepare to leave the house in Georgetown. They are visited by Father Dyer. Chris speaks with him privately and tells him that Reagan doesn't remember anything about the possession or the exorcism. Reagan then appears and greets him cheerfully, transfixed by Father Dyer's white collar. Before they leave, she subtly hugs Father Dyer and kisses him. As Chris pulls away in their car, she orders the driver to stop for a moment and gives Father Dyer the religious medallion that belonged to Father Karras. And in case if you're wondering what the medallion was, it was a medallion that it was like a little, I think it was a Saint Joseph medallion that Father Karras was wearing before he died, and the demon that was in Reagan's body, like, yanked it off his neck, and pretty much, yeah, that was the necklace. It was like a Saint Joseph type of medallion, I believe it was, and that was yanked off of Father Karras' neck before he died. So anyway, Father Dyer has the religious medallion that belonged to Father Karras, and after she and Reagan drive away, Dyer pauses at the top of the stone steps before walking away. And that is it. That is the end of the movie. That is The Exorcist. And boy, oh boy, like, as good of a movie this is a crazy, messed up movie. But at the same time, it's still a good movie. It's still a good movie, but it's like one of those movies that is so messed up, if you know what I'm saying, right? But then, of course, this leads into, like, well, production difficulties. This film was so difficult to make. Literally, this was a cursed movie. I mentioned a couple of moments behind the scenes, most notably, like, for the scenes that I mentioned, like the angiography scene, the moment where Reagan was jerking off with the crucifix, and then leading to Ellen Bernstein's broken tailbone, and then the exorcism scenes where they use that fridge, where they use that refrigerator to make the room cold. I kind of mentioned those scenes already, but as for the rest, due to production problems and accidents on set, The Exorcist, originally scheduled for 85 days of principal photography, took over 200 days to wrap. 200 days. So it was supposed to be like 85 days of film of shooting. The original shoot date was supposed to be 85 days, but now it was 200 days. So let's do the math right here. You have 85 days to get this movie to film this movie, but then later on you have problems. You have problems on set, multiple problems going on set. So it extends to 200 more, to a total of 200 days. So how many more days is that? 115. Take 200 days, subtract that by 85, you get an additional 115 days. 115, if you know what I'm saying, right? That is an additional 115 days of shooting this movie, and that is insane. So then, as for the budget, the film went $2.5 million. So the original budget was actually $2.5 million, and as of 2023, it would be $13.8 million as of 2023. So, and that's over budget. ultimately costing the studio $12 million. I thought it was $4 million because it tripled the budget. Because I'm thinking like, oh, 4 times 3, that's 12. So that's what I was thinking in my mind. $4 million times $3 million, you get $12 million. That's what I was thinking in my mind at the start of this episode. But no, it was actually $2.5 million. But then it went up to like $12 million. And of course, adjusting for inflation, it will cost $66.3 million in 2023. So that's like, adjusting for inflation, $66.3 million in 2023. That's the total budget of that movie, like in 2023 standards. But 1973, that's basically $12 million. So early on, shooting was delayed 6 weeks after a bird flew into a circuit breaker on the house sets, starting a fire that destroyed all of them, except for Reagan's room. Later, another set was severely damaged by the sprinkler system. The 10-foot statue of Pazuzu was shipped to Hong Kong instead of Iraq, causing a 2-week delay. Wow, that's a hell of a delivery right there. But then there were injuries on set that also happened. I already mentioned Ellen Bernstein, but Linda Blair also suffered on set injuries as well. Linda Blair fractured her lower spine after being too loosely strapped to the rocking bed. And it was a take that was used in the finished film. She developed scoliosis with long-term health effects, as well as a lifelong aversion to cold from all her time in the refrigerated bedroom set. A carpenter cut his thumb off, and a lighting technician lost a toenail in different accidents. Oh, and then this keeps getting worse too, because like there's other people who are involved in this too, in worse conditions and situations. Actor Jack McGowan, who was in this movie, he played Burke Dennings. He passed away in 1973 prior to this movie coming out. He never saw the final cut, and he passed away after completing his scenes as Dennings. There were also other deaths among the crew or those close to them, included the night watchman, the operator of the refrigerator system for Reagan's room, and an assistant cameraman's newborn. I'm not making this up. That's what really happened. That's what really happened behind the scenes. And it gets worse, even more. Linda Blair's grandfather died during the first week of production, and Max von Sydow had to return to Sweden after his first day of shooting when his brother died, further delaying the production. And one of Miller's sons nearly died when a motorcycle struck him. Like one of Miller's sons, and that's Jason Miller, one of his sons, and I'm referring to Jason Miller, who played Father Karras. One of his sons nearly died when a motorcycle struck him. And then several years after the film's release, Paul Bateson, the technician in the angiography scene, was convicted of murdering journalist Addison Verrill. And then director William Friedkin believed there might have been some supernatural interference. And I quote for him, "I'm not a convert to the occult," he told the horror film magazine Castle of Frankenstein, "but after all I've seen on this film, I definitely believe in demonic possession." Those are the director's words, by the way. And he said that we were plagued by strange and sinister things for the beginning. And this is crazy. And to mollify the crew, Friedkin asked Father Birmingham, the film's technical advisor, to perform an exorcism on the set. And Birmingham instead blessed the cast and crew, believing that an actual exorcism would only make the cast more anxious. So Father Birmingham was able to, calm the cast and crew down instead of, making them anxious. So I'm actually glad Friedkin was able to bring in Father Birmingham, like an actual priest, on the set of the film to calm the film, calm and bless the cast and crew, because it's not easy making a film. I mean, let's be honest. God knows that is hard. God knows that it's hard to make a film and finish the film on time. But at the same time, the cast and crew deserve a lot of credit and recognition because this film was difficult to make, and at the same time, the film was able to be finished. They were able to finish this movie, and Father Birmingham was 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 blessing the cast and crew members, telling them that, hey, even though this is a difficult film, I believe you all are doing a good job. You all are doing a good job. It's a hard film, but hey, God bless you all for working on this movie. I believe that was what Father Birmingham was trying to say, but it was probably something like that. But let's take a chill pill, calm down, and not make things worse. You know what I'm saying, right? But anyway, that's pretty much about. But anyway, that's pretty much about it. But anyway, that's pretty much about it. That's basically the behind the scenes the production difficulties that happened on set. Oh my goodness, that was a tough one to get through. Now, my overall thoughts. I still enjoy this movie. The cast and crew, everybody involved in this movie did a fantastic job, despite the circumstances and a difficult process that they went through. I still believe the film did very well, even though it was a difficult film to shoot, and and at the same time is regarded as one of the greatest horror movies out there, and one of the scariest movies out there too. Come on. It is a scary movie to watch, and knowing the fact of how difficult this film was made, it was still a good movie to watch. It was still a good movie, even if the film can be difficult to watch at times. But it's still a good movie, and everybody who was involved with this movie deserves credit for. And everybody in this movie deserves credit. And that's basically it. That is The Exorcist. To anybody who's listening, if I miss out on anything from this movie, or even the production itself, please let me know. And to anybody who's listening, what did you all think of The Exorcist? Did you like The Exorcist? Did you not like The Exorcist? I would love to hear your thoughts. Other than that, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you all for tuning in to Codo Cinema. I'm your host, Mark Codo, aka Codoman. Remember to watch movies, stay positive, and good night. Until next week.